everybody, and welcome to the Influxer Summer Educational Series. We're coming to you live. Well, I am coming to you live from Orlando, Florida. I'm here at NACTA, which, if you're not familiar with NACTA, a lot of people are in the college athletics industry. It's a culmination of a number of different organizations within college athletics. Everybody from athletic directors to compliance officers to marketing folks. It's an amazing place to be, packed, thousands upon thousands of people here, and we'll see how long this Wi-Fi connection holds up. So I'm coming to you live from the exhibitor hall here, where Influxer is proud to connect with a lot of different folks here, and it's been a very busy week so far, but I have been so excited for this educational session, not just today, but I've been excited and clamoring for this session for uh, a couple of weeks here since I booked this guest. I have a friend of mine, and she is also a co-founder of a collective for Texas A&M Corpus Christi, but more importantly is her I guess I hate to say real job, but her real job is the managing partner for Ruble Ledbetter and Associates, and she is a fantastic fountain of knowledge when it comes to taxes. Former student athlete too, is my. She's got a little bit of everything that goes into this. Kendra Kinnison, and I am so excited to have you on, Kendra, and looking forward to our discussion today.
Thank you, Keith. Super excited to be here. As you said, have a lot of interest in college athletics. Never got to play. Probably the only big regret I have in life is not trying, but definitely have a lot of fun now, being a CPA and still doing all we can to support college athletes.
And I think that's really how you and I got connected, was through trying to figure out how to support some the student athletes at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and I got to know your wonderful knowledge, about a lot of the tax laws, and I'm really excited about this opportunity because as we were prepping for this opportunity, and as I go around the country and get to visit different universities and visit with different people, all over, there's a general guidance from a lot of organizations, athletic departments, don't forget about taxes when it comes to NIL. But beyond that, aside from saying don't forget about taxes, that's what we really want to get, into today. And, I think, when we talk about taxes, it's scary. I can tell you from my own personal experience, just filing my own personal taxes, it's scary. And, for an 18-year-old college freshman, yeah, I can imagine it's just as scary, if probably a lot more scary for them, when it comes to taxes. So, I'm really excited to, kind of start with the premise. And I know you were excited about this premise too when we were talking about it. Imagine you're an 18-year-old college freshman and you get your first NIL deal. Let's say it's $2,000. Now what?
And the way you first worded the question, was what should I be worried about? And that really, gnawed at me for a few days. And I thought about it, and where I'd like to start, just a few minutes going high level. And that is, I think if we can roll back the clock and, we're putting ourselves in the shoes of that 18, 19-year-old student athlete who's already wearing the hat of a student, already wearing the hat of an athlete, and now can choose to wear or has chosen to wear the hat of a business owner, right? They really are. They're a business owner. Maybe that Jay-Z line, the best, the best culmination of that line ever. And so they can see it as this huge burden, this huge mountain that they have to climb. Or I think they can flip it and see it as what a heck of an opportunity to learn the skills that they're going to need to learn to be successful in all of life. And so I think if we flip it and look through that lens and say, okay, you're right, this is a new era. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm a business and I've got to act that way. And there are a ton of resources and guidance to help. I think we can take the fear out of it. And I think if there's one thing I could offer to any athlete that might watch this, when we get scared of things, we pull back, right? We procrastinate, we let that mail, pile up, and we don't
Guilty,
address it, we
guilty,
don't
right here.
address
Yeah,
it right until we absolutely have to. I would say be proactive in this. Open your mail, open your emails, talk to, if you're working with a collective, which I think there are significant benefits to that, or if you're the 1% of the 1% and you've got other folks representing you, have conversations about this. The more I dig in, in preparing for this, fell down a few more rabbit holes. There's some advantages in any situation of being prepared, doing your homework, and facing this head on as a part of doing business. You are now a business. Your likeness is a business, and what an awesome opportunity that is. Lots of folks would have loved to come through at a time when that was an option. And so let's get ahead of it. Let's get ahead
yeah.
of it.
I spent a lifetime, a couple decades, in on the college campuses, and I often, have done I don't want to call them lectures. That sounds harsh, but I've often talked to teams and groups of student athletes, about financial aid and the need to do the FAFSA and all that. And a lot of that is based on taxes, tax results, and a couple of years back, the federal government rolled it back a little bit. So the FAFSA is based on 2 years ago, based on individual returns and things like that. And I know, like, entering the NIL space a little bit, it was okay, how much can I earn without negatively impacting my FAFSA and potential Pell Grants I can get. And I know they're this back 2 years to what the tax returns are, and in terms of like negatively affecting my Pell Grant, which is something not a lot of folks talk about, which is concerning to me, which is one of the reasons I really wanted to do this episode. Was there can be an impact on those types of things. So an average Pell Grant, full Pell Grant, $6,000-7,000 a year, if you know could potentially, somebody taking a $2,000 NIL deal jeopardize something along that line and negatively impact the Pell Grant. Um,
So
I've been,
let's unpack that a little bit, because
thank
when
you.
when folks say, oh, don't forget about taxes,
Yeah.
that's kind of throwing everything in a big bucket together.
Hmm.
And I don't think that's necessarily helpful. As you said, there's a lot of different areas of that. One is the kind of the obvious federal income taxes, that
Yes.
I think is what most people have in mind when they make that statement. Then there's self-employment tax. Um, Really, I think in almost every situation, NIL income is going to be subject to self-employment tax, unless athletes get really creative and really proactive in navigating that. Then there's state taxes. If you're doing work in a state that has an income tax, or your home of residence, or your university, and there's lots of research, lots of ways to mitigate it, but you're going to have to think about potentially state income taxes. And then, as you said, there's sort of the FAFSA side, which is you're likely getting grants, scholarships,
Right.
other things that are perhaps need based, and you throw a bunch of income on that, and now it may alter those formulas. For a lot of athletes, their parents are probably still claiming them on their tax returns, right? So now not only does the athlete need to think about their financial situation, but frankly, the parent does too. You may have to, depending on the volume of the NIL deal, 2,000 is probably not high enough, but maybe 20,000 is. Is the parent providing support, or is the child providing more of their support. So you really do have to take it layer by layer, and look at each person's got to actively look at their individual situation, and figure out how to navigate it.
I think you nailed it. I mean, without like telling every student in America, from Alaska to Florida to, each state's going to be a little bit different. Each situation is going to be a little bit different depending on the state law and, potential impacts and things like that. So, I mean, definitely want to encourage student athletes that are looking at a potential NIL deal. And I think in my mind, if it is a large NIL deal where we're getting into a lot of money, it's definitely worth talking to somebody like yourself, you know, about what the potential implications could be. If it's a relatively small deal that really isn't going to impact, the individual tax return, maybe,
Well,
or
and
unpack that.
yeah, and I've I feel like we've had a lot of conversations on this, and
Yeah.
I felt like I had a working knowledge, but I did some deep dives over the last couple weeks to just prepare for this specific conversation. And really, I think you're going to be surprised. I was. The magic number is $400. That is the
400.
threshold at which you need to file an income tax, a Schedule C, if it's that self-employment income. Practically speaking, it's probably 600, because you're probably not getting a 1099 from somebody unless you've got 600 in income. But at that threshold, because it's self-employment income, in which case it nearly always is, we can unpack that a little bit too. But it's almost always considered self-employment income, and so you've got to file that Schedule C and pay your self-employment tax, which is 15.3%, even if you're under the higher threshold for income tax, right? So that's why it's important to really look at each one of those layers. Depending on your situation, the income tax threshold is 10 or 12,000 that you might not owe any income tax, but you would still owe that self-employment tax.
And it seems like there's going to be a difference between that $400 threshold, the need to file, versus owing money. You know,
Well,
and
you're
it's not to
if
scare people, but yeah.
no, not to scare people, but if you're if you're getting your resources from a business, those businesses are required to file 1099s. It's a box that every business has to check on its tax return, is did you prepare and file 1099s for everyone that you made payment to, right? So a business, is going to file those 1099s, right? So the athlete is going to have a 1099. A collective is as well, more than likely going to follow the rules and issue those 1099s. Um, if it comes through a payment processor like a Venmo or a PayPal, you've kind of got another 1099K that they keep getting delayed, but eventually those reports are going to come through as well. And so, it may not seem like a lot of money. And this is where I said being proactive is important. Here we are in summer of 2023. Let's say athletes are earning money now, right? They're
Right.
they're earning money, or they're earning money in August or September. They're not going to get that 1099 until January 31st, of 2024. And let's say it is that $2,000 scenario, right? So they got paid $2,000 sometime in 2023. They're going to get that 1099 in January, late January 2024. They're going to need to, even if it's just that, they're going to owe $300 in tax, just the 15.3, just on that self-employment tax, and going to need to file the return. If they don't file their return, eventually they're going to get a letter from the IRS, and now they're going to have, late filing penalties and all of that. So that $300 is going to turn into more than $300, if they don't stay on top of it and have a plan, for doing that. So it needs to be at an awareness level, I think, at much lower, dollar amounts than I think many of us even somewhat familiar with the space realize. And I think a lot of people see that $10,000, $12,000 income tax threshold and think that's the watermark, but that's really not entirely accurate because of the self-employment aspect.
Well, I don't know if it showed on video, but you definitely raised my eyebrows a little bit there. I mean, that is good information you're not hearing in a lot of spaces. And I know, with these educational videos, some folks are watching us live. Some folks are going to watch us, through some of the recordings on YouTube and whatnot. And I'm hopeful we'll get some very good tidbits, that'll go out on social media highlighting some of these facts, because I don't think the general student athlete is aware of some of these figures. And I think there's kind of a reliance that somebody else is going to figure this out for me.
Well, and so let's talk about that. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that. If we kind of zoom back up to the to looking at this as a burden, a red tape, or looking at it as an opportunity to learn, to really round out an aspect of their education, while they're in college, while they've got somewhat of a safety net and a support network in place. So I think it's a great opportunity for athletes to think about who they want on their team. I think of our collective, we fully intend to support the athletes in tax planning and preparation and that kind of thing. If I'm an athlete, that's the first thing I'm negotiating, with my collective, or if you've got a significant enough sponsor, I'm saying, okay, who's going to help guide me through this, or if I go get my tax return prepared somewhere, or if I do, better yet, if I do some tax planning, September or October with somebody, who's going to foot the bill for that, or are you going to provide it? Because if you wait till March or April and you're filing, in my opinion, you've really missed an opportunity to think strategically, to be sure the athlete has planned well.
Yeah, those are great points. My mind is going in many different places here, and I know, here I am sitting in my late 40s, having a lot of professional experience, and there's so many areas to NIL right now where everybody's thinking there's so many different areas of the law. And I know, as an 18-year-old, 20-year-old college student athlete, you're worried about this, you're worried about that. There's so many different things, and you just unloaded some great information. There was a lot there. And I wouldn't want a student athlete to think, oh gosh, I just don't want to deal with any of that, I won't do NIL. I think that you nailed it. That's a missed opportunity, because I think you really highlighted an absolutely great point. This is great training for the future. Just as the student athlete wants to develop and wants to move on into some professional sector, they're going to need to sharpen and hone those professional skills to be mindful and planning and being proactive. Successful businesses, they're proactive, they're not reactive, and you're absolutely hitting on that. And this is a development piece that I think a lot of athletic departments, a lot of folks want to do and want to be a part of. What kind of advice? It's hard to get into specific advice, because I know you don't want to give specific tax advice to somebody without fully getting a chance to sit down with them. As hopefully there are parents that are also watching this video, and they're helping their student athlete really understand, this isn't just about the immediate payout of whatever the money is, and then you kind of walk away and there's no consequences. I think on the professional level, we see a lot of NFL players and NBA players, Major League Baseball players. You see the headlines of folks that made a lot of money, but there wasn't a lot of preparation. There wasn't a lot of proactive thinking in how that money kind of disappeared in different, some goes to an agent, some goes to this, and some goes, you know, and
There's
I think as we look at
yeah.
this part of NIL with these taxes, I mean, this is where you got to hone these skills. You want to be a professional baller in a sense. Well, great. This is how you start. You start, and I see this, what we're doing today, what we're talking about today, as 100% like if you're at a university, if you're the parent, if you're the student athlete watching this, and you're thinking, yeah, let's prep this person to be in the league or something along that line. You got to start thinking this way now, and might as well start thinking about it now when the stakes are
Well,
less
and while
on the pro.
while you can have some determination in how the income, flows to you, right? All income is not created equal when it comes to
Right.
taxes. We know this, right? So, as an athlete, let's give an example, right? There, I can think of a handful of things where athletes would just love to have the use of a car for a year, right? For many athletes, if you said, "What's your dream sponsorship?" It's like, "Well, let me drive, this particular car, and let's just take a year because it's an easily measurable time period." But let's say
Sure.
let's say they get the use of a $60,000 car, for a year, and so some car dealership's gonna run the numbers on that, and they're gonna say that the annual lease value of that car is, 18,000. So let's go with the 15. That's income. That athlete is going to get a 1099 for the fair value of that. Now, what's even worse is they're going to owe, best I can tell, if you don't do any structuring or planning, that's going to be self-employment tax. So they're going to
Right.
owe their 15% self-employment tax on that, and they're going to owe income tax on that. Now, depending on their bracket, and that's going to probably be factored in to their, to their FAFSA, and adjust their grants if they have that. And even worse, they didn't get a lick of cash, so they just now have a pretty substantial tax liability that they have created for themselves, and they didn't even get any money to go along with that to even offset those, that income that they got from driving that car. So, if I'm an athlete, make darn sure you really want that car, that it's really worth, because you're going to pay for a third of it
Yeah.
in tax, one way or another. So be sure that that's a trade that's really meaningful to you, or B, just ask for the money instead, and do something else with the money, or C, negotiate to get some cash payment with, where the person that's sponsoring the vehicle is also at least giving you some cash compensation to help even out the tax liability that's going to be due there. Don't take the car, drive it for a year, and then realize in March or April, oh shoot, I've got a pretty significant tax liability, and you've already graduated, you don't have any leverage left, you don't really have any room to negotiate. You want to negotiate that early in the process.
Man, if there is not a segment of our conversation that goes viral, what you just said about the car is amazing. I mean, I think that explanation is I don't think it's talked about enough. And I've not heard a lot of people talk about the paying of the tax on a car lease, where the student athlete's not receiving cash. How much of a bill do you want? You know, wow. I mean, let's let's play with the numbers just a little bit,
Sure.
just to give a little further idea to a student athlete that may have already received the lease. What should they expect to pay? Or let's say there's a student athlete out there that maybe has a deal on the table, or is expecting a deal on the table with the lease. So, let's say it is a year-long lease, and you think 18, 19,000. I think that's a number I heard you throw out there. You think that's probably reasonable for an average lease for 1 year on a
Well,
car?
if it's a high end
Okay.
vehicle, I think I've done, I and I don't know that have them tell you that number. I would say, first of all, don't wait till you get the 1099 at the end of the year to
Right.
know what that number is. First of all, I would say have that when you're negotiating the contract, know that, know that early. And remember, now you're a business, right? You are a business. You're a schedule C. You are no different than, the accountant doing tax returns, or the lawyer preparing paperwork, or the AC repairman fixing ACs. You are now an independent contractor earning income from your likeness. So you can also deduct expenses from that, right? Just as all of those other businesses can. And so tracking your expenses related to that business, which is you, and you got to have a business case for things. But I do think some of that, again, by planning ahead, preparing well, could be offset with some legitimate business deduction. So now you're not paying tax on the full value of everything that you're receiving from NIL. And this is where the conversations, really get nuanced. But I would say, there's a lot of information out there on business deductions. Doesn't, really the same rules apply as long as you make the mindset shift that you're a business. And for some athletes, maybe even considering setting up their own entity, whether it's an LLC, and routing that income through there, in some instances, might be beneficial. Now, you'd want to make sure that you're making enough that the administrative costs of that um, make sense, and that it's set up well. But again, this is where planning and getting ahead. I was looking at Orgeron's contract at LSU. I saw an article that's clipped it, and the contract is with an entity. The contract is not with him as an individual. So athletes, NIL, college athletes do not have to reinvent the playbook. The playbook exists. Just got to pull plays. It's kind of like coaches watching other teams and riffing on somebody's plays. Well, these plays are there. They already exist for businesses. We've just got to figure out which plays are best for each athlete, and have a game plan for them.
Great analogy. Playing on the analogy of a playbook and a coach, that's awesome. And I think that's very relatable. Let me shift gears just a little bit, because there's a lot of different types of NIL deals, and you alluded to that, and that's absolutely accurate. There's a lot of different NIL deals that are out there, and one of the prominent forms of NIL deals out there is a student athlete entering into a deal with a company in exchange for product and not money. And it might not be a year long lease on a car. It might be $50 worth of headphones or something along that line. And as a student athlete accepts some sort of deal like that, and in exchange they get to tweet about whatever company it is. Maybe it's a nutritional supplement, headphones, clothing line, or something, and they get a little bit of free product in exchange. How does that translate when we're talking about taxes? Is it generally going to be what the retail value is for the products, or is it going to be some sort of other type of line item? I mean, how would you look at that? And I didn't prep you on this question, so I'm
No.
sorry.
It's a great question, and there's some nuance. I mean, so the mechanism for reporting that is a 1099 miscellaneous, right? Um, and the threshold for that is $600. So I think, most businesses are probably not going to generate those if it's less than $600. Although you never know, because businesses really are get the filing requirements on businesses with the IRS is getting tighter and tighter. So I think that's the mechanism that's going to happen. And it's treated as income, whether it's cash or non-cash. It really doesn't change the tax treatment of that at all. Now, your point about the valuation, I think to some degree that could be negotiated into the contract, that they're able to get, X pairs of shoes at wholesale cost versus resale cost or something like that, and therefore keeping the income down and the same benefits, so to speak. And again, this is where I think planning
Yeah.
ahead and negotiating could help there, because then you're going to owe less tax. I mean, if you get a new pair of shoes a month, from a deal, and those shoes retail at $150, but your contract says you get them at wholesale, so you get them for $60, you've saved yourself quite a bit in taxes just by negotiating the value that's going to come to you on that 1099.
That's a fantastic point, because I have looked at and reviewed a lot of different NIL contracts that are out there in a lot of different spaces. And, I can't say, in the product exchange, type of NIL deals, that I've seen a lot of valuations or that type of value placement in the actual contract. That's a great suggestion for student athletes to kind of get that, make sure that's in there.
Well, and just have the conversation with the business. What
Yeah.
are you going to put on this 1099? That you're going to give me.
Yeah.
Don't let it be a surprise. In that, and I think the non-cash stuff, people can sometimes default to that, because frankly, it's better for the business, perhaps, to do that. But from a tax perspective, it's often not better for the athlete, unless it's something that they would otherwise buy with their own money. They may be getting value that they're going to have to pay tax on and not even like the stuff, right? They might be better off. Let's say you're going to get $10,000 worth of gear, in a non-cash payment. You're going to owe $3,000 in tax on that $10,000 worth of gear. What if you got $2,000 cash? Did you get a better trade? So this is where an informed athlete, knowing the formula, can negotiate on what is actually in their interest. If you've got a favorite company or a favorite brand, and wearing their gear is going to mean a lot to you, then absolutely go do that deal. But if it's a brand you don't love, yeah, rep them, but get cash, not the gear.
So let's say a student athlete is being very proactive and they are getting a cash deal for something. Let's go back to the round figure of $2,000, and they're getting $2,000 in exchange for doing a couple social media tweets and endorsing a particular company or product. Like, in general, like, out of that $2,000, how much should they set aside and make sure they kind of have in their back pocket for when taxes are due?
At a minimum, that 15%, that self-employment tax. Now, that's going to be net of their expenses, but if they're not doing a great job tracking their expenses, then 15% is a good is a good starting place. And I would say for anything less than $10,000, where you're not going to owe income tax on top of it, then the 15% self-employment tax is generally going to be sufficient for them.
So at a minimum 15%,
Yes.
though.
Yeah.
In general, but in some cases it could be higher, right?
Yeah, I think above, if we look at single filers above 10,275, income above that is now in the 12% bracket. So if they're getting, let's say, the $2,000 NIL deal, 15% is probably sufficient. So they want to save $300 out of that, tuck it away, maybe even go ahead and pay it in. We can talk about that too, ES payments. But at a minimum, stick it in a savings account and have it there for when you file. But let's take a $20,000 NIL deal, which isn't absurd amount. I think there's dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of athletes in the five figures. So they're going to owe their 15% self-employment tax on their net income. So again, this is where tracking expenses could help. And then they're going to owe 12% income tax of anything above 10. So now you're going to be at 27% of kind of your next layer of income. So they're going to want to be saving somewhere between 25 and 30% of their income to tuck away.
That's fascinating. That is golden advice right there. And I think, in general, what I hear in this space sometimes is you're going to owe taxes, as we started off with, but I think as we really gotten boiled, dug into some of the details, and telling student athletes this is the appropriate amount you should set aside and be prepared to pay, that is so valuable. That is so valuable. And just by virtue of doing this session, you probably saved a lot of headaches for a lot of student athletes who are watching this now or in the future, from all of a sudden scrambling when they go to file their taxes and try to figure out, oh gosh, how in the world am I going to pay this? I mean that.
Well, and factor that into I hope that we're empowering athletes to factor this into their negotiations, into their planning. Negotiate when you have leverage. So if somebody's bringing you an NIL deal, you have some leverage. They're interested in you. So the time to work out all of these details and tilt at least a few of them in your favor is early. Don't wait again until the following spring when paperwork starts showing up in your mailbox or in your email and you're shocked with what that paperwork says and the tax liabilities that it creates. Season's over. The reality of being able to get those folks back on the phone and say, hey, what about this? That may be a harsh reality for folks. So do it while you're in the planning stage. If you're negotiating deals this summer, if families are making decisions, have these conversations and the more we all hate contracts, but the more life experience you get, you really come to understand. Spell it all out in the contract. Yep. Put an addendum of this is what we expect to happen. This is what we expect it to look like. So at a minimum, you can plan for it. You can take that. Your parents can take it to the person that's doing their tax return, ideally before you sign it, but if not, right after you sign it, and say, hey, what's the implications of this? Or an athlete that's kind of embarking on their first. Hey, I'm adulting, right? I'm filing my own tax return. I'm my own business, and I need to be I need to be mindful of this. I think the athletic departments can likely help connect them to professors, resources. Collectives can be more mindful of this and making sure that we're providing this level of guidance, and that our awareness that we're being strategic on behalf of athletes. I know for us, we've purposefully gone slow to be able to go fast. We're purposefully trying to bake some of these best practices into our deals so that the athletes are set up for success, not so that they get surprises down the road. And to do that, you've really got to be thoughtful and strategic.
This is where I'm appreciative of a lot of the athletic departments I've come in contact with. They're sending links to some of the videos that we're doing to their student athlete populations, encouraging them to watch some of the content here. Not to just sell and market Influxer services. We're a little more global with our perspective and just trying to help. And myself, having been a compliance officer, the rest of the makeup of the of Influxer, former student athletes, and we know like getting this type of advice and this type of education is critical, and to not just the money in the now, but the money in the future, and how do you build things for for not just for now, but for the future. And I think everything you're saying builds upon that, and as you've been talking, one of the things that, I myself, aside from, my compliance career and being a lawyer, you know, I've owned a business before. And so I know, like when I've gotten into year end review, when I'm reviewing all of my expenses, what I paid out as a business, one thing, I've thought about, like, as we're talking here in terms of like product, because that is a very popular NIL deal, product in exchange for, some endorsements on social media. And, as a business, I'm going to be motivated to likely put a valuation that's high, you know, where I might want to say it's $199 in value, and wholesale it's $60 maybe to the student athlete. So so you're 100% right, where there could be a shock factor where the student athlete is thinking $199 for this pair of shoes. Oh my goodness. I didn't know it was going to be that much. And I think what you're saying, here makes 100% sense in the world to really, let's be clear and upfront with what the value is going to be. If that business is at the end of the year going to report to the government $199 in value, that, because that's what we're going to mark down as our marketing. And essentially, that's what the business is going to call it, a marketing expense. We spent $199 on marketing here, and the student athlete may think,
I wouldn't have paid, the athlete's thinking I wouldn't have paid, $200 for that. And I sure don't want to pay the 60 or $70 tax, for getting that, right?
Yeah.
In there. Absolutely.
I mean, it makes
so
it makes 100% sense in the world. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to run through a checklist, and if we want to turn it into something later, but I think there's like a top 7 things that I think, if I'm a parent, right, and my child, or I'm an athlete and super independent at a young age, either way, if I'm the sort of the financial representative in this case, I think there's a handful of things you're just going to want to be sure you think about in each situation. I think number 1 is read the contract, get a contract, read the details, make sure compensation is very clearly defined, and even the manner of compensation. Is it a royalty? Is it services? What is it? Or is it all of the above? Have a clear contract, have all of those calculations. If you're getting a pair of shoes, what's the projected value? Have those conversations early and understand it. Don't just be so excited that you'll sign anything. Really check the details there. Okay, the self-employment tax, prepare for it. From what I've seen, it's going to be really hard to avoid. It's going to be rare that an athlete can get NIL income and it not be subject to self-employment tax. So that's 15%. Pretty much in every scenario. Now, you do get to deduct expenses. So this is where record keeping and planning can help, but plan for that 15% self-employment tax. Do you need to pay taxes in throughout the year, right? Estimated tax payments. It's something that if you get a W-2, you've probably rarely heard of this unless you pay you pay taxes with your tax return. For anybody that's owned a business, you're very familiar with quarterly tax payments. Well, what we said now is athletes are effectively, in this scenario, business owners. And so they're going to need to look at whether they need to make those quarterly tax payments. And so again, somebody needs to be thinking about this. If it's not the athlete, then the parent. Dependency status. If it's a significant amount of money, does it impact whether that athlete is still a dependent on the parent's tax return, or whether the athlete is now providing more than their own support? And there's a lot of resources on that. For a lot of other reasons, you could tap into those formulas for calculating that support. You talked about the other one, financial aid implications, the FAFSA calculation. Again, factor it in. Make sure particularly in this non-cash compensation, make sure that a bundle of gear that you don't even really, you're not even that excited about, is not going to jeopardize some really strategic things in your life, before you accept that, do some tweets and get a giant 1099 at the end of the year that's going to mess up your other planning. So there's six. And the last one, international international athletes have their own unique set of hoops to jump through. I think you could have an immigration attorney on here to talk about that, but they're even more complex, and they need to be even more careful in how they plan. And I know Influxer is kind of leading the way in innovating in that space. But for the 10-12% of college athletes that are here on, what is it, the F1 visa, that's the
Yes.
the the typical visa, they've got a whole nother set of rules that they have to abide by, that makes this even trickier. And just be sure you're getting good advice and good counsel in that space.
I definitely appreciate the Influxer shout out, and definitely I did a presentation yesterday here in Orlando, and standing room only, and not even that. It was packed for a presentation, an hour-long presentation I did on international student athletes and NIL. And I know there's a lot of folks out there still trying to wrap their arms around understanding a lot of the complexities here. And you're right. For me, I got a special place in my heart when it comes to international student athletes and trying to help them navigate all the layers of different legalities, and taxes is absolutely one of those. I think I know we're out of time, and holy cow, there is just so much information from our conversation today. We're going to have to schedule something else, because I think, Kendra, you boiled down some of these really complex topics, and you've really made them digestible and relatable. And the analogy with the playbook is amazing. Um, we're definitely going to have to do something again in the future. And I know, as the athletic departments, pass this video along to their student athletes. Please keep tuning in. We're going to keep doing some, great informational tidbits like this. And I think we're going to have to pull some sort of graphic together with Kendra's top 7 tidbits, or we'll give it some fancy name here. You know, those were great pieces of advice. And Kendra, I've really enjoyed working with you, in the setup and the integrity with how you've approached working with the Shakas Up Collective for student athletes. I think you've an eye towards developing the student athlete, not just the immediate payout, but the development. And I really think our conversation today embodies and really shows that, that mentality. And I think it's just outstanding that there are folks in the industry that are willing to talk about this type of thing. And tell me a little bit about your firm, and how folks might, if they got further questions, they really want to get into the details about and ask questions that I'm not going to be able to answer, that you might be able to clarify a little bit. Can you give a little more information out about how to contact you? And we'll certainly put this information, like any of the captions and stuff we capture out. But
Sure. I have to giggle. I started to give out my social media handles, and then realized that, probably the only one I'm on that athletes are on is Twitter. So I'm at K Kinnison on Twitter. The firm is ruble-ledbetter.com. We'll have to put that in a link. But what we serve businesses and do thousands of tax returns. So that's really our emphasis area. And so this really was, already in our wheelhouse. And I've been, I was a nerd and a jock long before it was cool. I was the skinny kid, taking my basketball everywhere, dribbling it in the hallways at school, and getting in trouble. So this is a lot of fun to get to apply, what we do in our real world to something that we're passionate about. So I've enjoyed getting ready for this, and I've enjoyed, when we spun up the collective this year and getting to talk to the athletes and really understand their perspective. And I would just, athletes, I know this could sound overwhelming, but you're already in college. The real world is right around the corner, right? You're going to be in the real world sooner rather than later. You're clearly super talented if you're even involved in this conversation. Don't delay. Go ahead and jump in, and learn this stuff. Ask a few questions. Find some folks that you can trust. If it's not us, reach out to us, and we can use our networks to find somebody in your area that you can trust, that can be your counsel in this space, and face it head on. I think it really is a metaphor for the rest of life. Being fearful
Right.
isn't gonna take you very far. And if you're sitting in this space as an athlete, you haven't done there running scared, right? You've done that by preparing yourself, preparing your body, and facing challenges head on, and put this right in that category. Go for it and be proactive. And I think you might be surprised at how much you can learn and how much it can benefit the rest of your life. If you are going to go on to be a professional athlete, or if it's just going to inform, the other work that you do in the future.
Amazing words, amazing. And so I can hear the buzz happening outside the doors here at NACTA. Just to give everybody a little play-by-play action here, they're about to open up the dinner buffet line here and in the exhibit hall, so I can hear the multitudes of people outside the doors waiting to get in here. So it's about to get very loud in here, and then I won't be able to hear you, Kendra. Kendra, you have been amazing. I think the advice you've given is golden, and we're definitely going to have to do some more stuff here in the future to help out some student athletes out there. All that said, thank you so much, and we'll catch everybody next week with our next session. Thank you so much,
You
Kendra.
got it. Thanks, Keith. All right.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.